I had come here tonight for one reason, only money. The forbidden commission that arrived at my tiny studio 3 days ago, in a plain black envelope, no seal, no signature, only 6 words, written in a strong, elegant hand. 30 days. Hale House. Absolute silence. The payment offered was enough to save my father's life. Iris Vale was dying slowly in our damp Bloomsbury rooms, his lungs failing from years of breathing dust and poverty. So I had said yes before I even understood what I was agreeing to. Now I understood. The Duke finally lowered his arm. His chest rose and fell in ragged breaths. For one heartbeat, his steel-gray eyes lifted and met mine through the shadows. He didn't look surprised to see me there. "You're early, Miss Vale," he said, voice low and rough, like gravel under boots. "Most people wait to be invited before they witness a man breaking." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. My fingers tightened around the charcoal stick until it nearly snapped. I came to begin the portrait, Your Grace, as agreed." He stepped away from the ruined statue shards, crunching beneath his polished boots. Blood dripped slowly onto the marble floor, leaving small crimson stars. He didn't bother to wipe it away. "Then begin," he said quietly. "But understand this. I don't want another pretty lie hanging on my wall. I have enough of those. Paint what is real. Paint what no one else has ever been allowed to see, even if it destroys me." A chill ran down my spine, yet something inside my chest stirred. Fear. And something dangerously close to fascination. I should have been terrified. A poor artist alone with one of the most powerful men in England inside his private sanctuary, watching him shatter his own image. Any sensible woman would have fled. But I stayed, because in that fractured moment I saw the crack in the stone, and I realized the Duke wasn't hiring me to paint his face. He was hiring me to paint his soul. I met his gray eyes for a moment, and looked back at the half-finished portrait. "I'm trying to find what's underneath, but you keep it buried very deep." Rowan was quiet for so long, I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, almost hoarse. 7 years ago, I lost my younger brother in a riding accident. I was supposed to be with him that morning. But I chose duty instead. A meeting with the Prime Minister. A letter that couldn't wait. He swallowed hard. He was only 19. Full of life. Full of dreams I never allowed myself. And I carry that day with me every single morning when I wake up and put the mask back on. My charcoal stopped moving. The pain in his words wrapped around my chest like a tight band. I knew what it was to live with guilt. I had watched my own mother fade away because we couldn't afford the medicine she needed. Every time I picked up a brush, I remembered her gentle smile and the way she used to tell me my paintings would one day change the world. I set the charcoal down. "My father is dying," I said softly. "He coughs blood every night now. The doctors say the damp rooms in Bloomsbury are killing him faster than the illness itself. That's why I'm here. That's why I accepted a commission that could ruin my reputation forever. Because the money you offered is the only chance I have to move him somewhere dry and warm before it's too late." Rowan's gaze softened just a fraction. For the first time, the stone Duke looked almost human. We spoke more after that. Careful words at first, then deeper ones. He told me how exhausting it was to be perfect in public while feeling shattered inside. I confessed how society laughed at a woman who dared to paint for a living instead of marrying well and staying quiet. The portrait slowly took shape. Not the cold, handsome Duke the world expected, but a man with haunted eyes and shoulders that carried invisible weight. Then the outside world crashed in. It started with a single vicious rumor whispered at a gentleman's club. By evening it had spread like wildfire through London drawing rooms. Lord Reginald Voss claims the Duke is keeping a low-born artist in his private quarters. Mrs. Mira Hensley, the housekeeper, told me one afternoon, her face pale with worry. "They're saying terrible things, Miss Vale, that you're not here to paint at all." My stomach twisted. I knew exactly how cruel gossip could be. I had already lost 2 small commissions after word got out that I was living under the same roof as the Duke without a proper chaperone. That same night, an urgent message arrived from my father's doctor. Elias's condition had worsened dramatically. He was asking for me. The fever had taken hold, and the doctor feared he might not last another week. I stood in the dim hallway outside the gallery, the letter trembling in my hands, tears burning behind my eyes. Stay and finish the portrait, or leave and lose the only money that could save my father. I didn't know how long I had been standing there when the door opened behind me. Rowan stepped out still in his evening coat, his hair slightly disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it. "Miss Vale," he said quietly. "What's wrong?" I couldn't speak at first. When I finally managed words, my voice cracked. "My father is dying, and the whole of London thinks I'm your mistress. I don't know what to do anymore." He moved closer, close enough that I could see the faint shadows under his eyes. For a moment I thought he might reach for me. Instead, he clenched his fists at his sides, fighting whatever instinct had risen in him. Before either of us could say more, a sharp cry echoed from upstairs. Rowan's face went white. He turned and ran. I followed without thinking. In his private chambers, I found him on his knees beside the bed, breathing hard, sweat dampening his shirt. A nightmare had seized him again. The same one I later learned that visited him almost every night, his brother's horse rearing the terrible fall, the scream that never stopped echoing in his mind. This time when he woke, he didn't push me away. Tears slipped down his face, silent and raw, as he looked up at me with eyes full of 7 years of guilt and grief. "I can't save him," he whispered, voice breaking. "I couldn't save my brother. And now I'm terrified I'll destroy you too." In that moment, something inside me shifted. I was no longer just the artist he had hired, and he was no longer just the cold Duke who had hired me. We were 2 broken people standing on the edge of a decision that could save us, or ruin us both. And I still didn't know which path I would choose when morning came. The morning after Rowan's nightmare, the air in Hale House felt heavier than before. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his tears and heard the broken sound of his voice. When I entered the gallery at dawn, the portrait was waiting on the easel. Like a living thing, the eyes I had painted staring back at me with quiet accusation. Rowan found me there, standing motionless in front of the canvas. He looked exhausted, shadows deep beneath his eyes, but his shoulders were squared with new resolve. "Enough hiding," he said quietly. "Tonight I'm hosting a ball, and you, Miss Vale, will attend? Not as my artist, but as my honored guest, as someone I care for." My heart stumbled. "Your Grace, that will only make the rumors worse." "Let them talk," he replied, voice steady, even though I could see the fear flickering behind his calm mask. "I will not let them destroy you the way they've tried to destroy everything real in my life." That evening, the great ballroom of Hale House blazed with light and music. Crystal chandeliers sparkled like captured stars. Ladies in silk and gentlemen in black evening dress filled the room, their whispers rising the moment I stepped through the doors on Rowan's arm. Heads turned, fans snapped open, gazes sharpened like knives. I felt every stare like a physical weight. My simple emerald gown, the only fine dress I owned, suddenly felt cheap and out of place among all that wealth and breeding. Rowan's hand rested lightly at the small of my back, warm and steady. "Keep your chin high," he murmured, so only I could hear. "You belong here tonight." Before I could answer, two women approached with kind eyes. Widow Vera Langford, elegant in silver-gray silk, smiled at me with genuine warmth. "Miss Vale, I've heard you see the world with an artist's honesty. That is a rare and dangerous gift." Beside her stood Celine Ashford, graceful and composed. "Some of us are tired of masks," she said softly. "It seems the Duke has finally found someone worth removing his for." Their quiet support gave me strength, but it wasn't enough to stop the storm. Captain Miles Drummond arrived late, his empty left sleeve pinned neatly to his evening coat. The moment he saw Rowan, his face tightened with old pain. He pulled Rowan aside near the terrace doors. I followed at a distance, heart pounding, unable to stay away. "I warned you once," Miles said in a low, urgent voice. "That night in Spain, the ambush. You gave the order that sent half our men into the trap. I lost my arm because of it. Your brother wasn't the only one who paid for your mistakes, Rowan. And now you're dragging this innocent girl into your darkness." Rowan flinched as if struck. I stepped forward before I could stop myself, my voice shaking. "Captain Drummond, whatever happened in the past doesn't give you the right to punish him forever." Miles looked at me with weary sadness. "You don't know the half of it, Miss Vale. He carries more ghosts than any man should." The words hung between us like smoke. Later that night, after the last guests had gone, I returned to the gallery alone. The portrait stood illuminated by a single lamp. I stared at what I had painted. There, in the depths of Rowan's eyes, I had unconsciously captured the exact moment of his brother's fall. The guilt, the scream, the endless regret. It was raw. It was devastating. It was the truth he had begged me to find. My hands began to tremble. I had exposed him completely. If this painting ever left these walls, it could destroy the last fragments of his reputation. I reached for a cloth to cover it, to hide what I had done. "Don't." Rowan's voice came from the doorway, quiet but firm. He walked slowly toward the easel eyes locked on the canvas. For a long moment he simply stood there, taking in every painful stroke. Then something remarkable happened. A single tear slipped down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. Instead, he turned to me, his gray eyes shining with something I had never seen before. Not just gratitude, but wonder. "No one has ever seen me like this," he whispered. "Not my advisors, not my friends, not even Miles. You looked past the stone, and you found the man who's been drowning underneath." He stepped closer, so close I could feel the warmth of his breath. "Thank you, Iris." It was the first time he had used my given name. In that instant, the last wall between us cracked wide open. I was no longer afraid of what the portrait revealed. And for the first time, Rowan wasn't afraid of being truly seen. But as we stood there together in the soft lamplight, I knew the hardest choice still lay ahead. Because the world outside these walls would not forgive us for daring to be real, and I still had to decide whether I would finish painting the truth or protect the man I was beginning to love by burying it forever. The days after the ball became a storm of whispers and slammed doors. Every invitation I once hoped for vanished overnight. Ladies who had smiled at me now turned their faces away in the park. Shopkeepers who once greeted me warmly suddenly found reasons to be busy when I entered. London had decided who I was, and it was not the woman Rowan Hale had dared to stand beside. I sat alone in the small room they had given me at Hale House, the half-finished portrait leaning against the wall like a silent witness. My hands would not stop shaking. Then the letter came. It arrived in my father's familiar handwriting, but the ink was faint, as though written with the last of his strength. Iris Vale had slipped away quietly in the night. His final words meant only for me. My dearest Iris, do not paint what the world demands. Paint what your heart sees. That is the only legacy worth leaving. I am so proud of you. Papa, I read it through tears until the paper blurred. When I finally looked up, Rowan was standing in the doorway, his face pale with his own fresh grief. Captain Miles Drummond is gone, he said hoarsely. He rode out alone last night. Took a bullet meant for me in some foolish duel arranged by Voss's men. He died saving me again, just like he did in Spain. Rowan's voice cracked on the last word. He looked smaller somehow, the weight of 2 deaths pressing down on his shoulders. He crossed the room slowly and placed a thick envelope in my hands. This is enough to buy you a studio in Paris, a new life far from all this ugliness. The contract is canceled. Go, Iris, before I destroy you too. I stared at the money, then back at him. My chest ached with a pain so sharp it stole my breath. No. The word came out soft at first, then stronger. I will not leave. Not like this. Rowan's eyes widened in disbelief. You don't understand what they're saying about you now. Voss is spreading poison that will follow you for the rest of your life. I understand perfectly, I whispered. But I'm not finishing this portrait for money anymore. I'm finishing it because I see you, Rowan Hale. The real you. The man who carries guilt like stones in his pockets. The man who still dares to hope even after everything he's lost. And I've fallen in love with that man. Silence filled the room, thick and trembling. Rowan took one unsteady step toward me, then another, until we stood only a breath apart. Iris. His voice was raw. You have no idea what you're risking. I do, I answered, tears slipping down my cheeks. And I'm choosing it anyway. 3 days later, Widow Vera Langford opened the doors of her private salon for a small, exclusive exhibition. Only 50 people were invited, but every important name in London society had come, drawn by curiosity and the scent of scandal. I stood beside the draped canvas heart, hammering so loudly I was sure the whole room could hear it. Rowan stood a few steps away, his face carved from stone once more, but his eyes never left mine. When Widow Vera gave the signal, I pulled the velvet cloth away. A collective gasp swept through the room. There he was, on the canvas, Rowan Hale, the Stone Duke, but not as the world had ever seen him. His eyes held 7 years of guilt and grief for his brother. His shoulders carried the invisible burden of every order that had cost lives. Yet rising through the darkness was a single thread of golden light. A quiet hope I had painted into the background, the same hope I had begun to feel whenever he looked at me. The silence stretched heavy and dangerous. Then Lord Reginald Voss stepped forward, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. This is an outrage. The Duke has allowed this low-born woman to humiliate him publicly. I demand the portrait be destroyed and Miss Vale banished from decent society. Gasps and murmurs erupted. Fans fluttered frantically. Several ladies looked ready to faint. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. My hands turned ice cold. But before fear could swallow me whole, Rowan moved. He walked straight to the painting, stood beside it, and looked out at the crowd with calm, unshakable dignity. Let them look, he said, his voice carrying clearly. For the first time in my life, someone has painted the truth, and I am not ashamed of it. He turned to me, his gray eyes soft, with something deeper than gratitude. Thank you for seeing me, Iris. All of me. In that moment, the walls I had built around my heart shattered completely. I was no longer the frightened artist who had crept into his gallery that first night. And he was no longer the untouchable stone duke hiding behind perfection. We were simply two souls who had found each other in the wreckage and chosen not to look away. Yet as Lord Voss stormed out, promising ruin for us both, I knew the final battle was only beginning. And I still didn't know if love would be enough to survive it. The weeks that followed Lord Voss's outburst felt like walking through fire. Whispers turned into open accusations. Doors that had begun to crack open slammed shut again. I moved through London like a ghost, my name now spoken with equal parts scandal and pity. Then on a gray Tuesday afternoon, two women changed everything. Duchess Blair Marlborough arrived at Widow Vera Langford's salon, unannounced, her presence commanding silence the moment she entered. She stopped before my unfinished portrait for a long time, her sharp eyes studying every brushstroke. Finally, she turned to the small crowd that had gathered. "This is not scandal," she said, her voice clear and carrying. "This is truth, and truth, my friends, is the rarest art of all." Beside her stood Miss Harriet Lang, my oldest and dearest friend, the quiet schoolteacher who had once shared bread and dreams with me in our poorest days. Harriet stepped forward, her simple dress a quiet rebellion among all the silk. "I have known Iris Vale since we were girls," she said softly. "She has never painted for fame or fortune. She paints what her heart demands. If we punish her for that courage, then we are the ones who should be ashamed." Their words spread like warm light through cold stone. By the end of the week, the portrait was being called a masterpiece in the very drawing rooms that had once condemned it. Society, always hungry for a new sensation, began to look at me differently, not as the low-born temptress, but as the artist who had dared to show a duke his own soul. Rowan watched it all with quiet wonder. One evening, as rain tapped gently against the tall windows of Hale House, he took my hands in his and led me into the empty ballroom where we had first faced the world together. "I have made a decision," he said, at voice low but steady. "I will not hide anymore. Not my love for you. Not the man you helped me become." He drew in a slow breath, as though the words cost him something deep inside. "Tomorrow I will stand before the House of Lords and speak the truth. I love you, Iris Vale, and I am willing to surrender part of my political power, part of the influence they prize so highly, if that is what it takes to live honestly beside you." Tears filled my eyes. I saw the fear in the old habit of self-protection, fighting against this new, terrifying freedom. "Are you certain?" I whispered. "Once you say it publicly, there is no going back." Rowan smiled, then small and real, the kind of smile that reached his eyes for the first time since I had known him. "I have never been more certain of anything in my life." The wedding was nothing like the grand spectacle society expected. We married quietly in the modest sitting room of my father's old house in Bloomsbury, the same rooms where I had once painted by candlelight and dreamed impossible dreams. Only a handful of people stood with us: Widow Vera Langford, Celine Ashford, Duchess Blair Marlborough, Miss Harriet Lang, and a few faithful servants. When the simple vows were spoken and the plain gold band slipped onto my finger, Rowan leaned close and whispered against my hair, "You have given me back my life, Iris." Later that evening, as soft lamplight filled the room, we spoke of the future. Rowan gently placed his hand over mine and said the words that made my heart ache with joy and hope. "One day when we are ready, I would like our daughter to carry the name Sage Harrington. a name that honors both your father's quiet strength and the new life we are building together. A symbol that even from the deepest pain, something beautiful and free can grow. I could only nod too, moved to speak, imagining a little girl with her father's gray eyes and her mother's hopeful heart. When we returned to Hale House as husband and wife, Rowan did one final extraordinary thing. He carried the completed portrait himself into the grand entrance hall and hung it in the place of honor where every visitor would see it first. Not as a symbol of power, not as a trophy of his title, but as a daily reminder. Every morning when he descended the staircase, he would pause before it. Every evening when we returned from walks in the garden, we would stop together and look at the man and the light I had painted into his eyes. One quiet night, long after the household had gone to sleep, we stood before the portrait hand in hand. The house was silent, except for the soft crackle of the fireplace behind us. Rowan's thumb gently stroked the back of my hand. I used to believe strength meant never showing weakness, he said softly. Now I understand. The greatest strength is letting someone see all of you and still choosing to stay. I leaned my head against his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. And I used to think love was something beautiful people found in fairy tales, I whispered. But real love, it's the courage to stand together when the whole world tells you to walk away. We stayed there a long time, wrapped in the warm glow of the fire and the quiet truth hanging on the wall. The stone duke was gone. In his place stood a man who was finally beautifully free. And beside him stood a woman who had learned that the most powerful thing she would ever create was not a painting, but a life lived without masks. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for giving your time to this story. Some journeys shape us, and we hope this one left a mark on your heart. There are more paths ahead, more legends of love, hardship, and redemption beneath the western sky. Please subscribe, leave your thoughts, and travel with us once again. Thank you, and God bless. Aviso legal, disclaimer. The stories presented here are creative expressions and may mix historical inspiration with dramatized scenes. AI tools contribute to some elements of voice imagery and structure, but every published story is refined by editors and creators to ensure authentic, emotional impact. We honor YouTube's policies and do not generate deceptive likenesses or artificial depictions of real people. All audiovisual components are legally licensed. Any use, redistribution, or alteration of this content must be granted through written consent. Your presence here means a lot, thank you, for supporting artistic storytelling.